That is verified by that receipt, that is verified by Amanda, that is verified by Cameron as well, that Melody wasn't at Purcell Lane, that she was at Lake Lanier. Now, Dr. Atkinson's report, you'll see, this is basically the summary of the findings that Dr. Arden was referring to. I probably should have put it up when I had it. But it says basically you can't find entrance wound and unable to assess direction of a wound path. And like Dr. Arden said, a wound path is a bullet going through bone and muscle and tissue and subcutaneous fat, being able to track the path. Now, Atkinson was the whole copy and pasting. I'll get to that in just a second. But he couldn't say what organs were damaged again. Remember, I asked him, did he die of blood loss? Did he, was his heart hit, lungs, liver, all of that? He says he don't know. They want to blame everything on the fire. Dr. Atkinson couldn't say to a medical certainty that Mr. Farris was alive when he was shot. He did not want to answer that question. And if you recall from his testimony, he started giving him this big, long spiel about how I was like, no, you answer my question. Can you say to a medical certainty he was alive when that bullet entered his body? And he said no. And that corroborates what Dr. Arden is saying. Dr. Arden, complete honesty, was like, I'm not saying that you can't say that this is a homicide, but I'm just saying being academically honest with, I think his word, is I can't say that it is or is not. And when you've got is or is not, then you've got undetermined. And when you can't tell me to a medical certainty a man is alive when a bullet entered his body, then how can you say honestly to a medical certainty that a bullet killed him? And you can't. Dr. Atkinson couldn't say what rib the projectile was lodged in. He actually knew less about the rib and the bone than Gooding did. And the reason why is because he just copied, and he admitted to it, he copied Gooding's findings directly from cut and paste, directly from his report, her report, into his report. He never went out to that scene. He's putting things in this man's autopsy, talking about it was found on a burn pile, and here's what we did, and all of these things, saying that these things are factually true. But he didn't go there. He didn't do any of those things. He's basically taken somebody else's work, hadn't proven that he's actually, verified it, other than just who she is, and just said, this is true and correct. I'm going to say it's a homicide. Dr. Arden, I've talked about it so much. Remember, he just said, look, I think actually what he said was, I'm not going to say it's crazy, to say that y'all have listed this as a homicide. I'm just saying, y'all haven't showed me, excuse me, y'all haven't showed me, and he had everything, all the, he went over all the reports and everything, y'all haven't showed me to where I can agree with you to a medical certainty. He's like, I'm not going out there, I'm not putting myself out on that limb. Dr. Atkinson, he wants to put himself out there on that limb, be my guest. But Dr. Arden was not willing to do that. And you heard, I think he said, 3,000 autopsies that he had performed, been a medical examiner for 40 years, still practicing, got his own consulting business, all of these things. He's got all the credentials, in the world. And he's saying, no, I'm not going to go out on that limb based on these facts. And that in and of itself is reasonable doubt. Other witnesses. Ms. Frankish wanted to talk a lot about Addison and the text message to Melody, because that means that on July 3rd, Melody was planning on killing Gary. There's absolutely zero evidence of that. There's no text message, phone call, search histories, where there was any planning or preparation on July the 3rd. In fact, you'll recall Addison and Chris come out to the house. They come out to the house on the 3rd. She had just landed. Addison actually says they left, and then sometime later she texted Melody. And Melody didn't say, no, you can't spend the night. She said, how about tomorrow? And in fact, she did spend the night the next day with Cameron. But also with Addison, and the whole reason I called Cameron, y'all were probably like, this kid don't know nothing. But she did prove one thing. Addison, who is Chris's daughter, who was interviewed a year later, who testified that she's only hadn't had any contact with Melody, but had contact with Chris essentially through her mother, because that's how she had learned about the death and all of those things. But she made it seem like when they got out to Melody's house that Melody was not wanting them to go outside, didn't let them go outside. making them go get a bath way too early. You saw the text messages. It's 8:30 when she tells them to take a bath. They sneak out of the house, go get in the hot tub. Now, what's important, what Cameron actually establishes is Melody wasn't acting weird. Melody wasn't restricting them to go outside. That they went up to the barn. They went and looked at the horses. They went and saw the animals. They looked for Gary, and both of them confirmed they were down in that basement, and they didn't see any blood or any bullet. Nobody did. Nobody did on the 4th or the 5th. Anybody that was in and out of that house. Oddly enough, the last person, best you can tell, is the last person to come out of that basement is Scott before law enforcement gets there, looking for his magic gun that nobody's ever found and that nobody's seen. He's the last person to come out of that basement. And then the bullet is found. Chief Deputy Pinion, we've already talked about him. Him and Scott, he's just trying to see what's going on, and he's got Scott in minutes throwing Melody under the bus. John Lambert, that was really just to show the weird dichotomy, because Scott and Chris and Emily wanted to get on the stand, or did get on the stand, and basically say, "Oh, Daddy dearest, I loved him so much, I miss him, I can't believe this." While at the same time, you got Chris robbing him blind, him actually saying he was stealing, him admitting that he had used his bank accounts because he had the account numbers and all that, which is illegal, and he was doing it without Gary's permission. Gary actually texted him and said, "Your stealing has got to stop." Scott texted Melody saying, "Is he gone?" wanting to know if Gary was gone so he didn't have to do anything anymore. Those aren't the text messages of somebody who, you truly love this man. No, that was just their bank. And he was getting ready to cut them off. So Lambert, that weird interaction, he said, it wasn't fisticuffs like Mr. Fogus likes to say. It didn't rise to that level, but he said it was just weird. And then Scott making the statement, "Can't wait till you're gone so I can get this," or something to that effect. That's weird. That's not the statement of somebody if you love your father. Dave Thomas, yet again, showing Scott's aggression. With a whole, Miss Frankish, she got up here in her opening and was saying, well, Scott's dad was dead and he had a right to be upset. And then she said, his trailer. That ain't his trailer. That's not his property. That is Melody and Gary's. He wants it to be his, but it's not. Just like they want the money, they wanted the house, but it's gone. They wanted everything. They acted like it was theirs, but it wasn't. And Miss Frankish bought right into it, came up here and told y'all exactly that. He's upset his dad died. He's got strangers using his trailer. It ain't his. The owner of the trailer was standing next to it with Dave Thomas when he comes up acting like a nut, then chases him halfway over to recycling. Martha Jane. She's known about this case since July the 5th of 2018. July the 5th, 2018. In the middle of this trial, she called law enforcement and said that, "I have to tell y'all something. Melody stole a gun from me in 2019, and it was a .38. And when did she say that? After, and you'll have this back there with you, after she admitted to it, after you watched this man on YouTube commenting over Rusty's testimony. And the title of this video, "Did I Just Crack the Case?" Because that man said, and I asked her, that's where the gun came from. The next day, she is on the phone with Captain Hands telling the story about how Melody stole her .38. There is no evidence that she ever owned a .38. They got some .38 bullets, but also just to show you, under Winchester not pointed at, the .357 that her husband owned was still there, and it also shoots .38, so it makes sense that you could also have .38s. But there's no receipt. There's not a photograph of this gun. There's her words 6 years later saying that she's got a gun. Now, she sat on the stand and said, well, law enforcement never asked me about no guns. Yet again, July the 5th or the 6th, she knew Gary had been shot. And you don't think that that might be relevant then? It only becomes relevant when a little man with a YouTube channel tells you that it's relevant. And she admitted to that. She also admitted that she was embarrassed. She was furious at this affair. that she found out about, essentially on live television. Now everybody in Tullahoma knows it. She said she got to hang her head whenever she goes. Rusty destroyed the Barton name. And I also asked her, you believe that a mother should always protect her children? She said, I do. And I said, when you saw John Luke and I crossing those witnesses, you were furious. And that's when Mr. Fogus started his objections about let her finish her answer. Let her answer. She's 85 years old. She might be 84 years old. She might be 84 years old, but she came up with this lie because of YouTube and this trial being on television. That's the only way that she came up with this. She wants to talk about, Ms. Francis wants to talk about her picture is in the dictionary next to the word credibility. She has no credibility. She watched this whole trial. She knows everything. She knew to even say what color the gun was because she can go back and watch Scott's testimony. What does she do? Yet again, can't get the color right. She got the holster kind of right. She can't get the whole thing because you got to remember stuff when you're telling lies, and it's hard. And I'm sorry, when you want to show up in the middle of a murder trial 6 years later